Okay, I've got to confess, back in the day, I blind bought this, the original Prada L'Homme, purely because Lara loved this fragrance. That's Lara on the original Jeremy Fragrance kind of channel. She was one of his ladies, and she loved it, said it smelled amazing, so I went and blind bought it. But how does it compare to Prada L'Homme Intense? Stay tuned to Every Simp Fragrances to find out. Hello, thank you for clicking on the video. My name's Steve and this is Every Man or Every Simp Fragrances. As the little intro there suggested, today we're going to be comparing Prada L'Homme, the original, to Prada L'Homme Intense to see which is better and which I prefer, and if you should get both, one or the other. I've done something similar with Prada L'Homme Low and I'll link that video down in the description below. But today we are comparing this, the original OG. I mean, I've spoken about this loads on my channel. As you can see, I've absolutely rinsed it and nearly finished this bottle. I love this fragrance. It was originally a blind buy, as I mentioned, purely because Lara loved it. And in all honesty, when I first smelt it, I was a bit surprised. It wasn't what I was expecting. But I really learned to appreciate and love this as a kind of office fragrance. It's just super clean, super fresh, and it's just got a lovely little sort of subtle sweetness to it. I don't think it's particularly sexy fragrance per se, but it's certainly a fragrance that not many people are going to hate unless they've got a real aversion to iris. But how does it compare to Prada L'Homme Intense? That fragrance has been getting loads of hype, loads of love, so I was really curious, so I went and got a sample. So let's find out. I'm sure most of you know about Prada L'Homme, the original, by now, but in case you don't, or if you've not smelt it and you're just trying to decide which version to get, I'll break down this one, break down Prada L'Homme Intense, kind of what I get from both, compare the performance, and then which one ultimately I prefer. So Prada L'Homme then, as I mentioned earlier, it's just known for being this lovely, clean, office style fragrance because it's very safe, very versatile. And as I said, it's going to be hard to dislike unless you particularly don't like iris. So yes, it's very kind of iris heavy, and that's what it's known for. So for that reason, it often gets compared to Dior Homme, which is also very prominent in iris. And typically people sit in one camp or the other. They either prefer Dior Homme or Prada L'Homme. Personally, I've always preferred Prada L'Homme. So it is got iris, but that's not the only kind of floral note in there. It's also got geranium and violet. So it comes across as a very fresh, slightly sweet floral fragrance. So whenever I talk about sweet or sweetness with this fragrance, please bear in mind that I'm not talking about a synthetic, sickly sweet sort of sweetness that you might get from, say, like Spice Bomb or from the note of benzoin or benzoin. I'm talking about more of like a floral, a pleasant floral sweetness. So just please bear that in mind whenever I sort of mention this being sweet or subtly sweet. So yeah, in the base there is also like sandalwood, which kind of gives it a bit more of a masculine edge, but I think personally this is very unisex, but probably just touching a bit more masculine for me personally. And there's also amber in there as well. I don't get much, I think there's cardamom and stuff at the top, but I don't really get much of that. I just get this very clean, powdery, floral kind of sweetness that I mentioned earlier, with a little bit of woodiness in the base as it dries down. And that's it for me. It's super lovely, super clean, super fresh, and all of those kind of overused words whenever you're describing Prada L'Homme and this style of fragrance. As I said, when I first got this, it was a blind buy and I was a little bit surprised. It caught me off guard because it wasn't what I was expecting. But once I got to learn to appreciate this fragrance, I absolutely fell in love with it. And as you can see, I've rinsed it and I've nearly finished this bottle. So what's Prada L'Homme Intense like then? Is it the same but stronger, or is it different? Well, it's the latter. It's definitely a different fragrance. I personally think they've done a really good job in this flanker because it keeps some of that original kind of concept, the original DNA and obviously the presence of the iris, but they've gone in a completely different direction. I do sometimes wonder though if the sort of average Joe muggle on the street might just think the fact that this is just called Prada L'Homme Intense, they think it is the same but stronger, where it's definitely not. It's a different fragrance with different notes and accords. And to be fair, they do make it stronger, but I'll talk about the performance later. So for this, the big difference in this is the addition of leather. That is kind of what it's known for. So it's kind of iris and leather. So when I first smell this, like the leather is straight away there. For me, it's just so kind of obvious and prominent, even though I think it's actually a base note. It's there from the off for me. It's interesting with this because it's got iris, but they've removed the violet and the geranium. So this is definitely not as floral. And the leather makes this less floral and drier. I don't know if it's the addition of the leather and the removal of those other floral notes that just, but this to me just comes across as kind of drier and not quite as sweet. And as I mentioned earlier, that's that sort of subtle floral sweetness, even though this does actually have tonka in the base. So, but this definitely isn't as kind of sweet to me as the original. But as I say, just bear in mind what I'm referring to when I talk about sweetness. So yeah, when you first smell this, I get definitely the leather is there, and then it's almost a little bit jarring because I kind of get the leather and this powdery iris. The iris is definitely more powdery than floral compared to the original, and it's a little bit kind of jarring if you're used to the original like I am and you've used up a whole bottle. As it dries down, after about 15-20 minutes, that sort of iris and the leather start kind of blending together more, and they just start gelling and working nicely. So it just becomes I think the thing is to note with this one, to me, this is not like an iris fragrance with the addition of leather. This, to me, is like a leather fragrance with iris in the background. Because for me, I don't know if it's because I'm more sensitive to leather, because I don't particularly wear a lot of leather fragrances, it's just really noticeable. Others may sort of disagree with that. Yeah, and the other change for me is the amber in this has definitely been amped. I think it's moved from a base note to a mid note in this as well. So as it then dries down further, so as I say, you get to the sort of 15-20 minutes, it becomes a very kind of powdery leather. Like the iris is there and it's noticeable, but it's kind of just, the leather is the sort of star player and the iris is there, but the iris is definitely sort of drier and more powdery. It's not kind of as floral and sweet as the original. And then after it dries down a little bit further, 40-45 minutes to an hour, like the amber is definitely more amped to me in this fragrance compared to the original. I don't really pick up that much amber in the original, but for the intense version, I definitely get kind of amber coming through strong. So on the full dry down, this basically becomes an amber leathery fragrance with some iris, some powdery iris in there. But as I say, it's a lot, the iris and the fragrance in general is a lot drier and less floral, and it's just got a lot more oomph and backbone. So for that reason, it does make it more masculine, but it's still a unisex fragrance. Performance-wise, the intense version pisses on the original by quite a long way, to be honest. The projection is a lot stronger. It's definitely more noticeable. I find I need fewer sprays of this, even though it's like a sample with a kind of small little sprayer. I find I need less of this. Just like 1 or 2 sprays of this, it's really noticeable to me. But again, it might be the fact that I'm more sensitive to leather because I don't typically wear a lot of leather fragrances, maybe. So this is definitely a lot stronger in the projection. It's a lot more noticeable, and it's a lot, it lasts a lot longer. So it's a lot stronger in the longevity side of things as well. The Prada L'Homme I will get if I'm in an office, which is where it's best, as most people know. In a climate controlled environment, I could comfortably get sort of 5-6 hours. And then if you really wanted to notice it, you'd probably have to top up in the afternoon. But for this, it could comfortably last all day until I probably got home, especially if you went a bit heavier on the sprayer. But then you've got this chance of it being sort of quite, almost kind of choking. But again, I just wonder if it's me and I'm just a bit sensitive to leather, to be honest. So should you try Prada L'Homme Intense? Should you get it if you've got the original? Which do I prefer? I think, as I mentioned earlier, this is a really good flanker. They've kept some of those original elements and they've gone in a different direction and certainly made it more intense and stronger. I do, as I said, I personally think they perhaps should have named it something different because, I don't know, the sort of muggle might just think it's the same but stronger. But anyway, that aside, I think it's a great flanker. They've done a really good job. And if you like leather, definitely try this. If you like the original, you like leather fragrances, I think you'll really enjoy it, and I can see why a lot of people enjoy this. So I certainly would recommend it, and I can really appreciate it as a fragrance. However, I still prefer the original. I just think it, for me, it's just because it's become such a staple in my kind of frag rotation, and I've got like a real affection for it now. But I just think it's a better fragrance. I just enjoy it a lot more. And if I'm being brutally honest, I really respect this fragrance. I really respect Prada L'Homme Intense. I think it's a great release. I would recommend it. I would recommend you try it. And I want to really like it, but you know what? I just don't. I want to, And I'm not one to pull my punches, you should know that. I don't like saying, oh, it's just not my cup of tea. I will go in hard if I don't like a fragrance. But I can't for this because it's a bloody good release and I really respect it and like it for that. But I don't actually like the fragrance that much. I've really tried to like it. I've worn it lots and I just find it a bit dry, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that's because it's a little bit more woodier in the base, I think, but then it's just amber and leather, which is very prominent with a bit of iris, and that iris is more powdery and less floral, as I've said. So I find it a bit drier, and it just gets a bit choky in my throat, and I've not gone overboard on this. I've gone easy on the spray. I've been putting like a couple of sprays on, so nothing heavy from this little sample. But I just don't like it. I'm sorry. I would highly recommend it. I respect it. I think it's a great release. And if I was being kind of subjective or objective even, I would give it a really good score. But kind of subjectivity wise, I just don't like it. I'm sorry, I just don't. I much prefer the original. But by all means, comment down below and let me know which is your favourite. Do you prefer this? Do you prefer Prada L'Homme Low? As I say, I've reviewed that one before and compared that to the original, and I'll kind of link that down in the description below. But for me, the original, the king of Iris fragrances, because I think this is better than Dior Homme and Dior Homme Intense, etc. This for me is the king of Iris fragrances. I would like it to perform a little bit better, but you know what, I can live with it. It's a banger, and thank you, Lara, because I wouldn't have mind bought it if it weren't for you, and I wasn't such a simp, so there we go. Thank you for watching. I do really appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that shit. And I will see you for a video soon. Take care, much love.